All through history, there have been many wrong beliefs and misunderstandings about black people, driven by racism and prejudice. These false ideas and stereotypes have caused serious harm and still affect how people see each other today. It's important to correct these misunderstandings and promote a more accurate and empathetic understanding of black individuals and communities. In this video, we will explore common historical misunderstandings about black people, from distorted portrayals in the media to misleading narratives in education. These false beliefs have unfairly portrayed black people. By examining and dispelling these myths, we hope to bring truth to light and contribute to a more understanding and respectful society. Join us as we uncover these misconceptions and celebrate the diverse richness of black people and their culture. To support our channel, please like, share, and subscribe to help us grow. Your support means a lot to us. Number 1. Black people have deficient mental capacity. The false idea that different races possess varying levels of intelligence, leading to discrimination and prejudice against black people, has its origins in scientific racism, pseudoscience, and biased ideologies. Throughout history, individuals and institutions perpetuated this belief, resulting in widespread inequality. In the 18th and 19th centuries, pseudoscientific theories were employed to rationalize slavery, with one such theory being polygenism. According to this theory, different races were considered distinct species, with black people being unfairly regarded as less evolved and less intelligent. In his work Systema Naturae, published in 1735, Carl Linnaeus, a well-known Swedish botanist and zoologist, categorized human beings into different groups based on physical characteristics. Unfortunately, his classification placed Africans at the bottom of the hierarchy, suggesting that they were lazy and governed by unpredictable behavior. In the 19th century, Samuel George Martin, an American physicist and anthropologist, collected and measured human skulls. He believed that the size of the skull could show differences in intelligence between races. Martin argued that white people had bigger brains and were smarter than black people. However, his ideas were later proven wrong. In 1994, Richard Herrenstein and Charles Murray wrote a book called The Bell Curve that brought back the debate about race and intelligence, claiming genetic differences in intelligence between racial groups. This assertion has faced widespread criticism due to flawed methodology and bias. The impact of slavery and segregation in the United States led to the formation of stereotypes suggesting the intellectual inferiority of black individuals. Systemic denial of educational opportunities further perpetuated these disparities, which persisted across generations. To prove that this misconception is wrong, we need to understand that intelligence is a complex concept influenced by genetics, environment, and access to good education. Despite facing systemic barriers, black people have excelled in different areas. Examples like Martin Luther King Jr., W.E.B. Du Bois and Maya Angelou show exceptional intelligence and achievements. Modern scientific consensus rejects the idea of inherent racial differences in intelligence. Instead, it emphasizes the importance of socioeconomic factors, cultural biases, and social determinants in shaping intelligence. Recognizing the historical context and the flawed nature of past claims about racial intelligence is crucial in dismantling this harmful misconception. By doing so, we can promote a fairer and more equitable understanding of human intelligence. Number 2. Black people do not experience pain. The belief that black people do not experience pain is a troubling and baseless idea that comes from a history of racism and exploitation in the medical field. This harmful belief originated during the time of slavery and has continued to impact medical practices over many years. In the time of slavery in the United States, black individuals frequently endured cruel medical experiments without the use of anesthesia. This was based on the false belief that they had a greater ability to tolerate pain or were impervious to it. Dr. James Marion Sims, who is known as the father of modern gynecology, performed many surgical experiments on enslaved black women without using pain relief. His actions demonstrate the racist beliefs that influenced medical practices during that period. The false belief that black people experienced less pain continued even after slavery was abolished, affecting medical education and practice. This stereotype was reinforced by medical textbooks and writings, resulting in insufficient pain relief for black patients. Some doctors were hesitant to prescribe pain medication or administer proper anesthesia during surgeries for black individuals, causing them unnecessary suffering. A well-known example of this misconception happened to Henrietta Lacks, an African-American woman whose cancer cells were taken without her permission for medical research. Even though she experienced painful treatments, her pain was often ignored or not properly treated. Her story showed that there is a biased way of providing medical care. Well-known medical institutions, like the American Medical Association, contributed to perpetuating these stereotypes by not addressing the unequal treatment of different races in pain management and anesthesia administration. Only in recent years have medical organizations started recognizing and advocating for fair treatment. To debunk this harmful misconception, the medical community needs to make a deliberate effort to confront and fix the historical and ongoing disparities in pain management. It is important to understand that everyone, regardless of their race, feels pain and deserves equal access to proper medical care and anesthesia. Addressing these biases and providing culturally sensitive care are crucial steps in correcting this deeply rooted misconception in the field of medicine. Number 3. Black people are prone to criminality. The idea that certain races are naturally inclined towards criminality comes from a long history of racial bias, discrimination, and unfair treatment. This harmful belief has been passed down through different channels, leading to unfair stereotypes and biased practices in the criminal justice system. In the time of slavery, black people were often portrayed as rebellious or prone to criminal behavior, which was used to justify harsh punishments and mistreatment. The fear of slave revolts caused black people to be seen as potential criminals and treated as less than human. This reinforced stereotypes about race. After slavery was abolished, there was a period called Reconstruction where efforts were made to maintain white supremacy by treating black people as criminals. Laws like the Black Codes and Jim Crow laws were created, which restricted the rights of black individuals and unjustly punished them for minor offenses. This reinforced the false belief that black people were more likely to engage in criminal behavior. Additionally, the film The Birth of a Nation in 1915 played a role in spreading this misconception through media and entertainment. Directed by D.W. Griffith, showed black men as violent and sexually dangerous, which made people believe negative things about them. This added to the stereotype that black people were criminals. In the late 20th century, the government's war on drugs also helped keep this belief going. The strict drug laws unfairly affected black communities and caused a lot of black people to be put in jail. The media often showed these communities as full of crime and drug problems, which made people think black people were naturally criminal. Even political leaders and decision-makers have sometimes spread this wrong idea. In the 1990s, there was a popular belief in super predators, which falsely claimed that a generation of young, mostly black people were naturally violent and dangerous. To uncover the truth, we need to understand all the different reasons why crime happens. These reasons include things like unfair differences in money and jobs, not having good schools or jobs, and unfair treatment by the police and courts. It's very important to know that saying one race is more criminal is not only wrong but also keeps unfairness and inequality going. To fix this, we need to change the way we do justice, stop treating people badly because of their race, and make sure everyone has equal chances to succeed. Number 4. Black people are the cured children of Ham. The notion that black individuals were the cursed offspring of Ham in the biblical tale of Noah was often utilized to rationalize slavery and racial prejudice. This fallacy originated from a misinterpretation of the Bible and was propagated and exploited by diverse individuals and organizations. The account of Ham and the curse of Canaan can be found in the book of Genesis in the Bible. According to the story, Ham, one of Noah's sons, witnessed his father's nakedness and drunkenness, resulting in Noah cursing Ham's son, Canaan. However, the curse was not explicitly associated with black people or directed towards all of Ham's descendants. Nevertheless, during the era of slavery, some interpreters erroneously connected Ham with blackness and used this misinterpretation to justify the enslavement of African people. One of the earliest proponents of this misconception was the Dutch theologian Petrus Comester in the 12th century, who suggested that Ham's descendants were cursed with dark skin. During the transatlantic slave trade era, European colonizers and American slave owners used this misunderstanding to dehumanize and justify the brutal enslavement of African people. They believed that black individuals were cursed descendants of Ham and used this as a reason to treat them as property. Some religious leaders, like Josiah Priest and Samuel Stanhope Smith, argued that slavery was part of God's plan and that black people were meant to serve white masters. These ideas were deeply racist and served to oppress and control black people. However, over time, scholars and theologians disproved these beliefs by correctly understanding the Bible. It's important to acknowledge that the misinterpretation of the curse of Ham was a distortion of religious teachings and was used to support slavery and discrimination. Today, we see this misconception as a painful reminder of how religion was misused to justify the terrible acts of enslavement and racism. Efforts to expose the truth and challenge this false belief have been vital in promoting equality and justice for all. Number 5. Black people are biologically different from whites. The mistaken belief in inherent biological differences between races has a troubling history influenced by biased ideas and flawed science. This false notion was used to justify discrimination and segregation. In the 18th and 19th centuries, European scientists and thinkers began categorizing humans into different races, creating a hierarchy with Europeans seen as superior. These classifications laid the foundation for unfounded theories suggesting inherent biological disparities. Scientists like Samuel George Morton, through biased research, claimed racial differences in intelligence and capacity based on skull sizes. These ideas were further used to argue that races had innate biological distinctions. During the early 20th century eugenics movement, this belief in biological differences was used to support policies such as forced sterilization, immigration restrictions, and racial purities in various countries, including the United States and Germany. Eugenicists falsely asserted the biological superiority of certain races while deeming others as inferior, leading to discriminatory practices. The Nazi regime, in particular, promoted the notion of Aryan racial superiority, using pseudoscientific concepts to justify the Holocaust and other atrocities. These ideologies resulted in the genocide of millions of people considered racially inferior. Even in the United States, racial segregation and discrimination were often justified based on the belief in biological differences. These ideas perpetuated the oppression of African Americans and other minority groups. However, modern genetics and anthropology have debunked the idea of inherent biological differences between races. While human genetic diversity exists, the genetic variations between individuals of different backgrounds are minimal compared to the variations within racial groups. This scientific understanding disproves the notion of racial superiority or inferiority based on biology. Challenging this misconception is crucial to combat racial discrimination and promote a fairer society. Recognizing the historical context and flawed nature of past claims about biological differences helps foster the understanding that racial disparities primarily stem from socioeconomic and historical factors rather than innate biological traits. Number 6. Black people are inferior to education. The problem of black individuals facing educational disadvantages is caused by unfair treatment, discriminatory policies, and unequal access to education. This false belief started in various ways and was continued by those who wanted to keep racial hierarchies intact. During slavery in the United States, it was against the law to educate black people. Slave owners often feared educated slaves and believed that teaching them to read and write could lead to uprisings. Denying education was a deliberate tactic to maintain control and reinforce the idea that black people were not as smart. even after slavery was abolished, the Jim Crow era enforced separate schools for black and white students. Black students were often sent to schools with fewer resources and lower standards. This separation was justified by the false claim of separate but equal, which said that black schools were just as good as white schools, even though there were clear differences in funding and quality. In 1896, the Supreme Court case Plessy v. Ferguson upheld racial segregation in schools, reinforcing the idea that black students were inferior and couldn't succeed in integrated schools. Throughout the 20th century, standardized tests were often biased against black students, leading to lower scores and supporting the stereotype that they were not as intelligent. Some researchers incorrectly argued that these disparities in test scores were due to natural differences in intelligence, rather than unfair disadvantages. Negative stereotypes about black individuals in the media and popular culture have also contributed to the mistaken belief that they are not as capable academically. Despite the historical injustices and stereotypes, black individuals have consistently shown their intellectual abilities when given equal opportunities. Accomplished black scholars, scientists, artists, and leaders like Maya Angelou, W.E.B. Du Bois and Thurgood Marshall have proven that the idea of educational inferiority is false. To address this issue, we need to understand the historical context of discrimination and work towards giving everyone fair access to a quality education. It's important to close the gaps in funding, resources, and opportunities so that all students can succeed, regardless of their race. Number 7. Black people are inclined to violence. The false belief that black people are naturally more violent has its roots in racism and biased stereotypes. This harmful idea came from different sources and was spread by those who wanted to justify discrimination and social inequalities. During slavery in the United States, black people were often portrayed as violent and dangerous to justify their enslavement and mistreatment. Slave rebellions, like Nat Turner's Rebellion, were used to reinforce this stereotype. Even though these uprisings were acts of resistance against oppression, the Reconstruction era and the rise of the Ku Klux Klan made this misconception worse. The Klan used violence to intimidate black people and their supporters who fought for civil rights and equality. They wanted to make it seem like black people were a threat to white society. Biased media coverage also played a big part in spreading the stereotype of black violence. News reports exaggerated crimes committed by black people, which reinforced negative stereotypes and gave a distorted view of black communities. In the middle of the 20th century, during the civil rights movement, some people tried to undermine it by saying that peaceful protests were violent and chaotic. They wanted to keep the false idea of inherent black violence alive. Even today, cases of police brutality that mostly affect black people are used to support the stereotype of black violence. Media coverage of protests and unrest sometimes focuses on isolated incidents of violence, ignoring the larger message of seeking justice. To show that this misconception is wrong, we need to understand the historical context and the systemic racism that led to disparities and crime. It's important to know that crime rates are influenced by social and economic factors like poverty, limited access to good education, and systemic discrimination, not by inherent racial traits. We need to work towards changing the criminal justice system, addressing inequalities, and promoting fairness and equality for everyone. These steps are necessary to break down this deeply rooted stereotype and create a society that includes everyone. Number 7. Black people live in underdeveloped societies. The idea that African societies were less developed is a long-standing stereotype based on colonial and Eurocentric biases. This false belief came from different sources and was spread by those who wanted to justify the exploitation and colonization of Africa. During the time when European countries colonized Africa, they portrayed African societies as primitive and in need of improvement. This was used as an excuse to take control of African lands and resources. European colonizers used their view of Africa as undeveloped to show that they were superior and had the right to govern African people. Some early European explorers and writers contributed to this misconception by describing Africa as a mysterious and backward continent, ignoring its diverse cultures and civilizations. The idea of social Darwinism, which suggested that societies evolve from primitive to advanced stages, also played a part in this stereotype. It was used to label African societies as primitive and less advanced based on biased standards. Well-known scholars like Hubert Spencer and Rudyard Kipling promoted the belief that Europeans were superior and Africans were inferior. Kipling's poem, The White Man's Burden, and his writings reflected the idea that Western countries had a duty to civilize supposedly less developed societies. In reality, Africa has a rich history of advanced civilizations that disprove the stereotype of primitiveness. For example, the Kingdom of Aksum in Ethiopia had a sophisticated civilization with writing and a thriving trade network. The Mali Empire was known for its wealth, learning, and strong leadership under Mansa Musa. Great Zimbabwe was an ancient city with impressive stone buildings and signs of an organized society. Recognizing Africa's diverse history and contributions to civilization helps challenge the effects of colonialism and leads to a more accurate and respectful understanding of African societies. Number 8. Lack of technological advancement. The idea that African societies lack technological advancements is a result of biased views from European colonial powers. They portrayed Africa as technologically backward to justify their colonization and resource exploitation. Early European explorers and writers emphasized Africa's perceived primitiveness while ignoring its technological achievements. Biased scholars dismissed African innovations and attributed them to outside influences rather than recognizing them as independent advancements. In reality, African societies have a rich history of technological achievements. For example, they were smelting iron in sub-Saharan Africa long before other parts of the world. Ancient African civilizations like the Kingdom of Aksum developed their own written scripts for communication and record-keeping. Innovative agricultural practices such as terracing and irrigation systems enabled sustainable farming. To challenge this misconception, we need to acknowledge and appreciate Africa's contributions to technological progress throughout history. African societies have made significant strides in various fields, disproving the false belief of technological inferiority. By recognizing these achievements, we can overcome the biases of colonialism and develop a more accurate and respectful understanding of African cultures and their advancements. By questioning these untrue stories, we not only show respect for the truth but also help create a world that values and appreciates the diverse Black communities. When we acknowledge what happened in the past and take action to make positive changes, we are paving the way for a future where everyone is treated fairly. Let's keep discussing and doing things that make a difference, knowing that each step we take towards understanding and truth brings us closer to a society that treats all its members with equal worth. We've reached the end of this video. We value your thoughts and would love to hear your comments in the comments section, as we always appreciate your input. Also, remember to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos to spread awareness about the truth regarding Black history and perspectives. Thank you for watching.